Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Star Family Wisdom Podcast. I'm Jenna Layden, founder of Star Family Wisdom and a former global vice president for Whole Foods Market. We're so glad you're here with us today.
We are indeed. I'm Sinead Willihan, your co-host of the Star Family Wisdom Podcast and a former social justice activist and public school educator. We are very, very glad you're here. And Jenna, this was a fantastic conversation we had today with Yael Green, who is a very special person, unlike anyone we have had on this podcast before. Yael is a hybrid. She is a investigator of things that are not quite on the mainstream level, yet she's using science, history, ancient wisdom, and other knowledge to piece together what she's offering everyone, which is a bank of incredible wisdom and knowledge about water and all the various ways that water has intelligence and is a part of our world, our bodies, and our reality. She's really something else.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to hear someone like Yael talk about water in this way. You know, we hear a lot about the elements from different teachers and shamanic practitioners and that sort of thing, but to have someone who is almost like fully embodying the element of water and all that it offers us and the wisdom it holds was just a really different kind of conversation and like a really cool one, you know, like we don't have those sorts of conversations enough. And I think this is a really cool one for the audience around higher intelligence wisdom that is coming to the planet. So Yael, being a hybrid human, is acting as a bridge in a way that is bringing this kind of different level of knowledge, this different level of understanding about water and how we interact with it, so that we can, you know, transform and heal in a different way and start to have this just like more meta view of the elements and how we interact with them. And I think like that's she's just such a perfect representation of that sort of cosmic wisdom that we're now in touch with, that we can bring onto the planet, that is more at the forefront, that is more visible, right? Someone who is saying, hey, I'm a hybrid human and here's the wisdom I have to offer. Like, that's incredible that we're in this time and able to have those sorts of conversations.
Yeah, and her knowledge is really, truly deep and unique, and she's so passionate about it. I mean, you can really tell that this is truly a calling for her and part of the reason that she feels she's here on Earth. But also, I loved what she said about how water itself, as a conscious being, a conscious living being that moves and breathes and, you know, has an experience of being alive, so-called, just in a different way than we are. She talked about it as a living conscious thing and how it's chosen to be here on Earth because it wants to develop relationship with the human consciousness and with the Earth consciousness. And I love that. That was probably what stood out to me most about it all, because that also branches out to when she was talking about how water goes deep down into the Earth naturally, but the natural process of water goes deep down into the earth, into the darkness, into the shadows, so to speak. You know, that can be, she was talking about a mirror of her own journey of doing shadow work and addressing her fears and things like that. And then coming back up to the light, and meanwhile, having gathered all this information from underneath, so-called, right, which could be our subconscious or the deeper, more unknowable parts of ourselves, and bringing it up to the conscious level or bringing it up to the surface. You know, there's just, she brought so much depth of understanding and so many different interconnected meanings in what she was talking about. It was amazing. I loved it.
Well, and just how out of touch we've been, you know, with these natural elements and in their natural form. You know, we talk about structured water, and if anyone needs just like the, you know, primer version of what we talked about today in our Raise Your Vibe challenge, we have a challenge that is specifically about water. And so that will set you up to, you know, work with Yael and understand this a little better if this is all new to you. But, you know, we've put water in pipes and our water is unclean in a lot of ways. And there's so much just importance around our health and wellness and reconnecting with the water, let alone this other aspect of what we're talking about around flow and abundance and around the vortex of creation and all that sort of stuff, which we talked about in the episode, like at a very basic level, you know, getting good, structured, clean spring water is so important for us as beings, as bodies, as humans. And this just brought all that kind of flooding back to me, you know, this connection around our health and our wellness. And there was a study by a Japanese scientist. We can link to the book in the show notes, and it's all about water and how water responds to its environment and responds to words. And some of you listening probably have seen this, or maybe even seen the images. If you haven't seen the images, you can see them in the book or in the challenge. You know, we show some of the research on that too, but it's incredible what happens to water given the environment it's in, and how ugly the water molecules can look if it's, you know, in an environment that is not healthy, positive, supportive, and then how beautiful and amazing and crystalline the water molecules look when it's in a really supportive, positive environment. And like, think about our bodies as being, you know, mostly water, you know, like it's just something we don't think about or we forget about. And it's so critical to us as beings and being healthy beings and living in a way that is really supportive for us holistically. So I think this is a really cool episode for people. Like, this is a conversation you don't hear a lot about.
No, you really, really, really don't. And I mean, even though we know clean water is an incredibly important topic, we haven't thought about it on much of a larger level than that. It's just about, you know, getting basic sanitation, like basic water to the majority of people in the world who really don't have access to clean water. So, you know, we here in North America, you're in the USA, I'm in Canada, you know, we can turn on the taps in our kitchen and technically drink that water and be okay. That's considered to be clean water. But to you and I, it isn't. And yet it's still so much cleaner than the vast majority of people on the planet. And then it made me think about what Yael was saying in terms of the ancient ones, like our ancestors of the land, who knew very well how water was alive, it was a spirit, it was a consciousness, it was of the earth, and they had a relationship with it, and they carried that knowledge forward. But that they, at least in Canada, are living on reservations where they have very poor water quality. There's a reservation that has had undrinkable water quality for over 20 years. And, you know, how is that okay? That is not okay. And yet it continues year after year. So, you know, water is such an incredibly multi-layered topic when it comes to social justice, health and wellness. And then we can go higher with that into consciousness, into, you know, cosmic connections. It's really, what you're saying is true. It's a really remarkable conversation, and Yael is something special. And I really hope that we can stay in contact with her and keep working with her, inviting her back.
Yeah, we need to have some more conversations around this. And it's also interesting. You know, we talk a lot about synchronicity and just the nature of how the universe responds to us, and like what you were talking about around, you know, these elements and all of life being conscious, right? And that we can interact with that. Just around the timing of this interview, in my location here in Arizona, we've been super dry for like a couple of months now. Very little rain, very little water flow in the area. And just around this interview, the last 2 days and right now, just rain, just water coming down. And that feels synchronistic to me around this conversation, and like an example of how, you know, the universe, earth, the element is interacting with us around this topic.
Yeah. And I, you know, have talked to you before about how I feel like the wind and I have conversations sometimes, you know, that's a realization I've come into this year. And you had this wonderful idea of bringing different people together who have very deep connections with earth elements. I'm not going to say more than now, because we might want to tantalize our audience with this thing that we may be creating later. But I love that idea of bringing in different people who, you know, have deep relationships with the different elements and talking about them as a sort of a conscious, alive being that they have studied, that they've gotten to know, that they've spent time with, and can communicate that in a way like Yael can.
Yeah.
It'll be unbelievable.
Well, and we need all of the elements balanced in our lives, right? Like that's part of this conversation too. It's like we talk all about water in this one, but like it really is just about how do we bring a balance of all of those elements into our lives, into our energy field, and how we're interacting with life around us. And yeah, I think that's a good thing, for the audience to just kind of think about and mull over, how are those elements present in your life? Is there an element you're not connecting with more? Is there an element you're over connecting with? And just think about that balance that is or isn't there in your life. And then today we'll talk all about water and get into that element and bring more of that into your life. And tell us in the comments if you experience rain or an abundance of water around this conversation, because I'm super curious if that happens to more people. I bet it will. And Yael talks about how you'll know if it's right for you to work with her and with the modalities that she brings. So definitely stick around to the end of the conversation so you can learn more about how to connect.
Yes, and of course, as always, we have all the necessary information to be able to connect with this wonderful guest in the show notes. So take a look at the show notes and you will find what you need to connect with Yael right there. So thanks everyone, as always, for being with us. We just love building community with you, and we hope that Yael is going to be part of your community, at least of learning, as a resource, as a wise person who can help us on our journey. We really think you're going to enjoy this conversation a lot. So stay tuned, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, and we will see you very soon on the other side. See you soon, everyone.
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited to get into this conversation with you guys.
It's so fun to meet others who are, part of this journey and part of that more kind of cosmic connection that we're learning more about every single day, it seems like, on planet Earth. And so we've got so much to talk about. I'm personally curious about your journey and kind of all things that led you here to this point where you're so knowledgeable and carrying so much wisdom in what you do with the water matrix. But before we get into that, which we'll talk all about, tell us about who you are and how you got here with us today and doing what you're doing. What's your journey been like? How did you learn about who you are as a hybrid?
Yes. So I know everyone has an origin story, and so mine doesn't start from this planet. And this is my first time on the planet. I have always known that. I have been waiting for this time period to start to unfold and open up to actually be a part of what's going on. So I remember being dropped off here, and it was quite shocking in that I had a whole other life on a ship. I was basically in the hybrid form. We know it here on this planet as the hybrid project that has started, in the 60s, 70s-ish, around that time period of the first hybrids. And obviously now we have, I would say, quite a few, although I'm probably looking into a narrow scope of the amount of beings here, but there are quite a few. I've been on this planet for 50 linear years, which is quite a long time, actually, when you compare it to how things move in ship time, basically. So being created on a ship and going through lives and experiences as a being that doesn't have a body, which when I was younger, there was always one foot there, so to speak. Because when I was dropped off here, I just remember that basically on a ship, we have ship families. And there's one sort of, and I'm using language that I think we can understand because we have those contexts here. So ship mothers, and in traveling, one of the times the entire family was moving through the cosmic space. And I remember coming down to this place, having no idea what Earth was. And all of a sudden I look up and everyone is traveling back without me. And that started the process of being here. I came into a family that in some level, obviously, because there are contracts being made prior to this. So it's not a shock for the unconscious of a family to have a hybrid, whether they have conscious memory of it at all during the time that I'm with them. But it was the perfect space because the father that I had on this planet was part of my ship family. He was with me for 12-ish years. He actually, so my 50th birthday is tomorrow. His birthday was a couple days ago. So we have that in-between connection and he left 5 days after my birthday when I was 12 on this planet.
Oh, wow.
That was the time period of now you're moving and you've had enough to now move into what you're here to do. In my human growing up, I never had any parameters or boundaries put on me. So, and I know humans often, there's all of these patterns and paradigms and karmic connections that happen. So for me, I didn't even have a curfew. I never looked in a mirror, really. I thought I don't need to see myself in that way. I have always just moved in the space that I moved with, not having any expectations of how I should be. So clearly planned well. And that sort of, I did a lot of understanding of what it is. I know everyone's trying to get back to their cosmic origins, and I've been trying to understand human origins, which is, I know exactly the opposite direction that everyone has been going in. But to really be able to infuse this energy, and basically that's what I've been doing up until this time period of waiting for people to be able to be aware and connect with that and have cleared enough of what's been happening for some people to be able to see and connect with that grid work. I don't want to keep going. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, lots of them. And happy early birthday. Happy early birthday. So you had memories as a child?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like. So from the very beginning, that was very conscious for you that you were from somewhere else and came in.
Yes.
Okay.
And I had no problem. I didn't really understand actually what this type of family was.
Right.
I still have a difficult time understanding why people, when they don't get along with someone in their family, would stay in relationship with them.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of weird. We have a lot of these ideas around obligation and responsibility, as you were saying, the paradigms and the boundaries. Yeah.
Yes. And so these obligations and responsibilities are not how I, quote unquote, grew up. I mean, we learned a lot about Earth through sort of these visioning experiences through technology on the ship. It doesn't prepare you fully, though. I will just tell you that, because if you're solely in that frequency of whatever dimension that you're working, you don't get it until you're here.
Yeah.
It doesn't make complete sense.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting too that the three of us share, something similar here, but we've had different experiences in uncovering that. You had very early childhood awareness, right, of your difference and coming from another place, other planets, other civilizations. And for us, that awareness is coming later in life and opening, later. And it's such an interesting thing to see that reflection in each other, but also, have those kind of different growing up experiences where, we also kind of felt like it's hard to understand Earth, but until you're really conscious of your soul's journey, it all is just a little confusing. So I think that's so cool that you had more of that conscious awareness growing up, and even though it was still confusing, you were able to kind of sit with that, I guess, maybe a little easier, it sounds like.
Yes, there was, because my connection with understanding, like embodying the understanding of universal connection of energy is like that, which is a good thing and a hard thing, because most of the time you would rather experience that. you would rather really like, I don't even know how to put verbal language to it. It's that oneness that like I can feel it in this moment, and that's sort of how I've walked around up until this point. And it does lead to the water piece, but like this has been the time of just, I hold myself in this space, and it's very easy for me not to get connected to anything karmic, anything that's shifting in the world, because it's in the same, it's not, nothing is happening and everything is happening at the same moment.
Yes, yes, yes. And I've got a couple of questions for you. One is more related to your life now. One is what you touched on earlier about your relationship with your father. So I'll ask you that one first. You were saying that your father in this life had known you before on the ship. So how did you discover that? Did he say to you when you're both here in this life, was he talking to you about that, or was it an understanding you learned another way? How did that come about?
It was the understanding of how the two of us interacted in the rest of the world. I knew how he was working with me, that this relationship was specifically for me to be prepared to be on my own in this work. It was, yeah, it was just specific.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Can you give us an example of one of those moments where you realized that?
So, and I say this because I think, most of our relationship was happening in a different dimension versus the third dimension all my life. Because there were these very, like, all of a sudden at his funeral, there was a whole nother family that he had that I didn't know about. It's like, oh, okay. And whenever we had our experiences together, it was in this capacity where nothing else was happening at the same time, at those moments when we were exchanging the information. And it looked like general things, like we were building a chemistry workshop, or whatever it is that we were doing. It looked like normal things, but there was a lot of transmission of information and energy that was happening in order to prepare, because he's been here before. So that's sort of part of his job as being a guide. So that was, it looks like everyone else does things.
Are you in contact with him now? Is he back on the ship?
Yeah, and all of the hybrids that were in that program that are still there, I've constantly connected with them.
Cool.
How do you stay in touch with them? Is it telepathic? Is it through technology? Okay.
It's that, and a lot of the transmission of information happens through water, obviously, since it's all of what makes up this actual blue planet. I think we forget one of our biggest transmission devices and technologies is water, although the water animals have not forgotten that.
Yes. What did you have early conscious knowledge of water being part of your mission?
I've always been in water.
Okay.
Always. From when it's always been the space where I went to, and it looked like I was a competitive swimmer for years. I would spend 6 hours a day in the water. I've just, all the time that I can be in the water, I am, because it's where everything's coming through. It's how we affect the grid works. And I know Earth grid workers, like, that is important. But I think also the water has a lot of potency that we forget, that Earth workers forget about. And that is really a lot smoother to move through, because those bonds happen so quickly, like the actual chemical bonds. If we go into the science and physics of it, the chemical bonds itself of water are constantly breaking and reconnecting, breaking and reconnecting, and then structuring to hold information. So,
wow. Okay, so yeah, I want to delve into this water topic because it is so fascinating, and you have so much to share with our audience about that. I have this question I want to ask you, which is not on the topic of water. It's related more to you and your life. And I just feel like I want to ask this question, even though it's not where we're going right now. So bear with me. So you're talking about water, and it's making me think about how other things flow in our lives, right? So you're talking about how your family life flowed, that there were no parameters put on you. You were able to grow in a certain way, and how your relationship with your father flowed and, you know, coming into being. So what is your social life like? What's it like for you to flow in the 3D dimension? Like, what's it like for you to be in a human body and be here doing all of this, you know, paying bills and having an electricity, having electricity and like doing all this very rudimentary humaning? What is that like for you? What's your social life your social life like?
I'm surprisingly very good at this, all of the doing things of being human. And I think because a lot of the work that I did was portal work. So there's the geometry and organization of how to clear portals, of how to work with councils that are creating laws and procedures of how to do it. So there's that sort of Arcturian type of energy around, I think, paying bills and creating structures. And I think the interesting thing about that is that we can take the opportunity to do these, I guess, mundane things of paying bills in a structured way that actually is, and I want to pull this because it comes from the like overly spiritualized version of let's do everything with this intention. But if there's people who connect with the geometrical piece of everything, that all of these pieces can be done in a sort of geometric, spirited, multidimensional way. Does that make sense? I just want to,
yeah, it does for me too. Like I was actually just having a conversation with Sinead the other day about like synchronicity and like the flow around synchronicity and how like our space-time is geometrical form, right? Like we know energy flows in geometrical form and our energy fields represent a certain geometry that's supposed to be in sync with the rest of space-time. And as we shift our geometry and our energy field, and that unlocks new keys and codes and synchronicities that we can connect to. So like, that's essentially what you're talking about here, but you're bringing it down to that like mundane level of just creating the structure in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that, and I know it's like bringing abundance through the secret and all of those pieces, but this is the meat of it.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to people who really love just sort of tinkering with those things in that way. And I think I do a lot of very physical things because that's how I can move through this planet. And I'm generally with and around people, not around a lot of people. And I have my, like I know other hybrids, and, we have our funny hybrid jokes about humans and things like that, that other people don't seem to find funny. But it's the physical piece in, like voice, all of the sensate things that connects with the nervous system, I think is the closest that I'm able to get in the physical body to making sure that the energetic connection, I'm bringing that in. Otherwise, I mean, like any of us, we can leave the body, a walk-in can come in, or we can just leave it and it can, get recycled back. But, for most of us, like, I could leave this body. I don't have an attachment to it, so I have to attach myself to it in very physical ways, or being around people that are voicing, or the vibrations of sound, or things like that. I put myself around a lot in order to stay here.
Wow. Well, the sound part is very whale and dolphin of you. I wanted to ask you if you have any wisdom to impart about whales and dolphins. I mean, the knowledge of their intelligence and their purpose here on the planet and their obvious connection with water not just literally, but far beyond the literal meaning of water, is becoming more apparent finally, right? As we are gradually waking up to the fact that animals are intelligent beings and they have a whole experience, and they are, they have emotions, so they have thoughts, and they have families and all kinds of things that we really have not been attributing to them so far. So what kind of wisdom would you be able to share about the water creatures, maybe even octopi as well, or octopuses? But particularly whales and dolphins. I know they're very significant in conjunction with water and water's meaning.
Yeah, just as you're talking about that, it just makes my heart open up. I don't feel that way about little human beings, but the animal beings, it's like, yes, because that's like, if I could have lived in the water on this planet, I mean, obviously all of us came from water. We walked out from the sea, and sometimes we forget that as humans, but we walked out from the sea. So I think that so if I can also follow me here with some of the healing and health connections for people, our plasma is closest to what the plankton in certain areas of the ocean is. The mineral balance in the plankton is closest to our blood plasma.
At Star Family Wisdom, we're experiencers of ET contact. That's right, we're in communication with ET beings we know as our star family. We've had lives in advanced civilizations, and we're here to be a bridge between the galactic community and you. And the galactic community can't wait to meet you. That's why we created the Meet the Star Races course. In this course, I teach you about the star races who are in contact with Earth right now. How do I know who the star races are? Well, my star family guided me to the information they want you to have. Just like all of the other information here at Star Family Wisdom, we bring you the wisdom and guidance that our ET friends want you to know. You'll learn about our true ancient history, why the ETs have been here on Earth, and what we can learn from our ET brothers and sisters. The star races are part of our history, and they're part of our future. Join the galactic community today with our Meet the Star Races course and use the code GALACTIC at checkout to get 50% off.
Hence, it makes sense that we're sea creatures prior to being land beings. And that's the piece, I think, that because dolphins and whales are trying to bridge for us how to still be human. They're not asking for us to come back into the ocean and be with them. And I think that's sometimes also in the general, like, we're not jumping to the 9th dimension and going to live in there. It's information transfer. You know, it's like, if I was like, okay, now I'm in this, okay, but you're still in the body. So it's a similar thing. It's like, how can they communicate through this physical vessel? And it happens through those exchanges within the plasma. And when every single cell in our body has internal and external structured water around it. And being able, and there's these cool little things called aquaporins, which are, they're the little portals to the cell that allows transmission of that structured water and that information. So you can be in any part of the ocean and still receive, obviously, we know, quantum physics, distance has no, doesn't matter. So we can receive all of that information that are transmitting through these structured water cells and transmit that to each piece of DNA, each piece of protein, every biological function that's happening in our body. And that's miraculous healing. I could go on, but
Actually, please do go on. But I was just taking a minute because that just really feels, that really resonates with me. That makes so much sense. That really makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I love what you're saying. Talk more, please.
And I want to hear too your thoughts on like programming water and how we can utilize water in like an intentional healing way, and how you guide people in that.
Yeah, those are, so there's the fact is that, and water has been, and I think there was a lot of people who looked at water in the early 20s. Rudolf Steiner, Marcel Vogel, we've got a lot of, technologists that were water keepers then. And I think it's interesting because a lot of their fragmentation that is coming back into play right now of who has gathered their informational fragments to put them back out. So Victor Schoberger, all of them looked at the process that living water goes through within our planet. So starting off, we've narrowed off water into the waterways, into the pipes. So the deadening of water happens when we don't allow it to move within its path, right? It goes deep underneath to gather. It goes in the dark. It goes in the shadows. It's mimicking our journey of growth and opening up spiritually. And it does it because that's what it does, because that's what it knows. It moves underneath to the darkened places. It gathers the minerals, and then it starts to come up, which is why we talk about spring water is already structured. It comes up. It allows the sun to start to complete. It's called immature water. We allow the sun, the UV rays, to start to complete that structure of the information that it's gathered from the earth itself, from deep within. Mm-hmm. So you've got all of those beings who live within the earth, that they're gathering information from the beings within the earth who have decided to stay in there and do their work. You've also got everything coming from all of the galactic origins sitting within that water as it comes up, and then it structures it because it's moving along a winding pathway. Right. And so it's learning. It's constantly learning. And I know no one can see this except for you guys, but it then moves the energy within this toroidal structure, right? It becomes vortexed, which is what structured water does. So every time we grow, we experience a vortex. Mm-hmm. We experience that. And that's the energy. We're both, it's two types of energy. A lot of the energy that we're talking about now is that we move within the world is very masculine. Masculine meaning that there's this explosion out of the water, right? That top part, but it really needs to hone in. We need that complete vortex that's happening. And how are we going to get to, we're going to move over to the feminine, and we're going to move over there, and we won't have a balance of it. So can we, and I know like everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to, everyone's got a movement. Water never has it is movement. It never states its movement. It is movement. And so I think who knows how many linear years it will take, but we're moving into that space where we do this. And you asked about octopuses earlier and jellyfish, and that's a movement. Why don't we put those on signs and put those in people's windows? And I know this might upset some people, but like the octopus movement, that should be the next movement there is. So
I love that. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love this, Bill. This is amazing. You're tying together so many things. I can't stop nodding. I'm just like nodding and nodding and nodding for anybody who's listening and not watching right now. And I wanted to ask you something about what you're saying. So you're saying that the water goes deep into the earth and collects information from the earth itself, and all the beings that live in the earth. And I'm thinking about the natural filtering system that water has to go through. It has to go through soil, it has to go through sediment, it has to go through rock. So when you are counting the beings of the earth, are you counting the soil as a being, the rocks as a being?
Everything, which is why when we change the actual structure of the earth, we change the information that gets put within the water. So when we're ingesting water, we have the opportunity to learn everything that has ever happened in any dimension. I remember when I was like 20, a teacher said to me, she said, you don't necessarily need to study, but if you can open yourself up, all the answers are there. So just drop them in and write them out. Or do like, yes, that's correct. And so water is another way to drop into that information. I mean, think if for 12 years of schooling, if you're from the United States, you were learning how to drop in to bring down the information. And we're now trying to learn with books and only get 1% of the information over all that time, but we would be expanding, the gray cells, I think as Perot says. But that's our opportunity. So we talk about, I almost want to call programming water to just expanding into the consciousness of water. So we shift, and words have always been hard for me. If we could have just telepathically done this and just sat here.
Well, Yael, we already are, because you answered a couple of my questions telepathically throughout this combo.
Good. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I feel like when people are listening to things, they're just getting frequencies of whatever the strung together letters that human beings thought were interesting to put together.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like we can think of water as wisdom. And this is making me think of the fact that we are not the only water planet in the universe or in our galaxy. And just think about the wisdom that our water planet holds, right? Because of its journey, its being, all of the beings who have been in connection with it. But think about the wisdom that these other water planets hold. And I'm curious, like, what have you done in terms of connecting with those planets? Can we telepathically, consciously connect with those other worlds, that other water that exists in our universe, and utilize that to bring in more information and wisdom to our fields? Like, this is just, like now making me think of all these connections, and I'm sure you've gone there. What's your journey been like with that?
Yeah, and that's in terms of the portal work that I've done in the councils that I've been on, not here. Those are like, that's some of what we have conversations about, quote unquote, is there are connections between all of the waters on all the planets. And that's, if we use water as the technology, and we're not even talking about, how the ancestral lineages of this planet already have that deep connection understanding, that we look forward and back, if there is a forward and back in this moment, that they're sending technology through water that is able to resonate at dimensional levels that we're not yet ready for, which is fine, totally fine. And we have to seed the capacity to hold that. I think a lot of what happens now is there's not enough capacity to hold that. I mean, within a physical body, the nervous system and the capacity of this physical vessel to hold this information has to be prepared. I mean, why do we think there's so many memes of weird looking aliens? It was like, because you tried to stuff that energy into this human looking body. So of course weird things are going to pop out. We call weird. Sometimes I think having 6 packs is weird. Why is that okay? Why can't an alien looking being, right, be the model?
A lot about human things. Like, there's a lot about like human clothes. Like, a lot of it's weird. Doesn't feel right.
I know. Why aren't there any calendars with aliens? Like the alien calendar. Which month are you? Like, I'm July. So it's right now is the time that things, we're making the connection to the very masculine energy is needing to understand on a scientific level, which I think is important. We need to understand, the quantum physics of things. The problem is there are 74 anomalies in water. How are you going to break that down and put it into something? you know, we're learning to move away from the boxes that are safety to expansion and contraction. So we're learning about this process of how we move with expansion and contraction versus the boxes. And so it's interesting. I mean, I love science. I really love how we're doing that. And we've got to have that continual movement of balance of people who are doing the science and people who are also doing the cosmic exploration to have these conversations. And I think there's where we're missing, is this overlap of these conversations, because we bring forth one side and then another side, and how do we connect that into the DNA strands, right? That becomes your crystalline DNA. So right now we're trying to weave that crystalline DNA and turn those, you know, gates, portals on in the crystalline DNA, which is why there's such an obsession right now with crystals and with all of these technological devices that connect us, because we're trying to reconnect with that crystalline part of ourselves, which is where I feel like I came in with that. This is where I moved from. And so that's part of what I give, is this reflection of that. So if I'm working with someone, or a group, it's that mirroring of that within them, so that it all of a sudden deconstructs their world and starts to reconstruct it to what they've known, and then integrate it into the vessel.
That's so beautiful and important work. And I just want to reflect for the audience, you know, for anyone who's like, okay, what was that? What does that mean? You know, it's like, I think, you know, we talked about programming at the beginning, and how, you know, as humans who have had all of these lineages and you know, ancestry on Earth, right, where we're carrying so much trauma and so many programs that have distorted our field, have distorted our structure and the expression of our DNA, and you came into this world without that distortion. So you are a representation of that more kind of pure structure of energy, and how that then represents itself in the human form and at a DNA level. And so through your work, it sounds like you're able to help people very quickly, perhaps, go through that kind of deprogramming, restructuring process, which is so necessary for our healing and transformation on this planet. Like just to get back to like a baseline, you know, kind of standard of humanity, right? Where we're flowing together better, and there's a balance between the masculine and feminine polarities and all that, right? Like that, it seems like at the core, that's really what your work is kind of driving towards. Am I reflecting that correctly?
Yes, which is honestly why I appreciate, because everything, when I'm saying it, I always love, because everyone translates it for me, which is great. That's like, so for everyone, this is what's being said. And I appreciate that. That's perfect. Because when I hear, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And thank you for
Good. Good. Well, I'd love to hear more about like how you do that work with people. So we've heard about the water, and you know, how do you bring that into your work with clients or groups? Like, what does that look like?
So I do sacred water journeys at locations. We can, if someone can't get to locations, we also can do it within their own home. I love, you know, another piece that I love, the hydration and the capacity to structure water is important as a first step for people, I think, that can't yet. It depends on where people are in their journeys. I generally work with people who are pretty far in their journeys of this, so that they can understand it. But I also work with people who are still trying to unfold some of their trauma, but they have the skills underneath it to do their own work. Because I basically come in pretty quickly, and then they're needing to do the rest of the support work for themselves, which the water supports. and that sort of holds them through the process. I do physical work with people in the water, and that journey is amazing because we get to move in the water and feel what it's like to sort of visit these other dimensions, because the environment of the water itself is non-space, non-time. And so all of a sudden you're moving within anywhere from the womb to, you know, wherever, whatever dimension that you believe we're at of information downloading right now. And you come out with a different matrix in your physical field. And so the process is holding on to that and working with that like you would work with, you know, dough or something that it's not, here it is, and now it's programmed in you. It's that you're starting to acclimate yourself to it. I mean, when you think of how the animals within the sea move and learn and test things out, and they take that time and that space and they hide in and they come out and they know how to move. And so that's some of, when I work longer term with people, like that's how we learn, is to go in with the rest and learn and feel it and then come out. So it's a process that I think is a container that a lot of people find that all of a sudden they're here and they don't know how they got there. It's just sort of moving within them, and all of a sudden they've, oh, I'm here now. So there's no 10-step process. There's no like, you're going to now do a 10K month. It's not like any of that. It's I'm just going to sink into this and feel what it's like. And all of a sudden I'm here, and I'm not exactly sure how that happened, which is exactly what the water does to us. When we get in water, when we get near water, it is, yeah, around now, all of a sudden there is this whole different space around me. How did it get there? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And so that's the energy that sort of I move, whether I'm doing it in the water session, whether I'm doing ritual work with people around sacred waters, whether it's just, you know, Zoom sessions and we're working through whatever point someone's at because they're wanting to be more expansive and really connect with their full embodied. And I know that word is way overused, but they're truly full embodied energy, because water is always embodied with everything that it's experiencing. You don't hear water complaining.
Mm. Mm.
That
Good
makes perfect sense. I resonate a lot with what you're saying about feeling the presence of water around you, and, you know, feeling or having a sense of your matrix having changed. Because I said to Jenna, for example, a million times, I'm in Toronto, we live right above Lake Ontario, but this leads up to my second question for you. There's an energy with lakes and rivers that I love, but not necessarily in a city. And you know, I've been really needing to be near the ocean, and so feeling that call. I grew up, you know, camping always at lakes, because I live in the province of Ontario, which is full of water. And so there's huge, beautiful bodies of water everywhere that my parents would take my brother and I to when I was growing up. And I never felt comfortable with myself unless I was in nature, because I found a lot of human behavior incredibly weird and I just didn't understand it. So nature was a solace for me, and I felt that difference keenly especially when I was near water. So this leads to my question for you. So I have a different experience of being near an ocean, being near a lake, and you were talking about doing healing with people in water. So what kind of water are you doing this healing with and in? And then also, do you choose different kinds of water based on what you're trying to do with the person? So for example, salt water in the ocean or running fresh water in the river. Tell us about that.
I have the same experience with water. So I grew up by the beach, and my entire body navigates by ocean. When we moved to Portland 2 years ago, it's by a river. And that I cannot drive around that city without Google Maps, because I have it, I can't get a river doesn't direct me to a point on the planet. So I just don't get it. Whenever I'm in LA, I get it because I could go anywhere without Google Maps because I can feel where, and I'm on the West Coast, I can feel where the ocean is because the magnetics of it, because the consciousness of it, if you listen to it, calls and has a behavior. And I think that goes into what you were saying, that nature as a being, because it has behaviors, but they're so subtle to certain people. And when our awareness softens, we allow that being to speak to us. Why do people go on all these journeys? Why is plant medicine so big right now? You know, all these journeys, because we want to gain a softer noise around so that our awareness can hear the behavior of the beings of nature. And water speaks. I mean, there's so much of it that it's hard not to hear it when you soften. And, you know, rivers, most of them nowadays have just been, unless it's a large, rivers are different than lakes, but like they're small and they've sort of put themselves, we've smushed them together, whereas lakes are a little bit more expansive. Their boundaries, because, you know, like their boundaries are movable. And that's the thing. Water creates its own boundaries as it moves through wherever that system is. And I know we always get worried when there's these floods, right? The Earth's origin stories, but it's creating new boundaries because we're not the only ones here. So reminding us that all beings can create boundaries. And, you know, it's like when you're in the ocean and all of a sudden there's this wave, you learn to sort of let it take you and be within it, because the fighting against it, you know, this is just a natural thing, right? Fighting against water versus moving within it pops you right up to the surface because of the vortex. So you move down and it pops you right back up.
Which is such a good like metaphor for like the emotional work we do, right? The shadow work, which you were kind of talking about earlier, right? Where like you help in a non-linear way, in a non-intellectual way, you help people go into that, right? Go deep into the vortex where it's not so pretty, but then you help them pop back out in a way that's like really fluid and easy and without that intellectual connection to the linear path, because it's not linear.
Right. You know, it's the nature. We forget about the magic. We've been moved away from the magic and the intentional to the sight and all of those senses versus the other senses. So we're all trying to get back to the magic. And there's a struggle inside sometimes between, I have to know it, I have to see it, it has to be known in a way that's familiar to the belief and the, you know, and this is, I think, where, and I don't know, where the connection with the feminine and the sensuousness of water comes in, because that piece of it is explosive in how do I just fully open up and be vulnerable and allow myself to be taken by it. And so that really connects us into that sensual, sexual piece of completeness of a being, and the water and how it has all of that. Water is non-gendered, but it is also full of all the characteristics of gender. So we can learn that because it has that whole cycle, as we do. But those pieces have been fragmented within us. So we like grab a piece of this and act on that, and grab a piece of it and act on, and it doesn't flow in that way. And we're trying to repair the fragments so that it can be a more full expression of all of that.
Yeah. we're getting back in flow.
Yeah. And it's making me think of, you know, all the ways in which I, anyway, have been used to thinking of water, whether it was in my previous, I call it previous me, like before I woke up.
Mhm.
So either previous me or current me, all the different ways we're used to thinking about water, that it means psychic ability, it means
Mhm.
emotion, it means all these different things. And, you know, it's the blood of the earth. And if we don't treat the water properly,
Mhm.
then we're not treating the body of the earth properly, and we're
Mhm.
getting diseases. And
Mhm.
literally every single thing we have comes in some way from the earth, and therefore we're poisoning ourselves. I'm just
Mhm.
thinking about how it's all so interconnected and so highly metaphorical, and what a beautiful job you're doing of bringing all of that together, because it's making me think of you're really expanding my thinking about not just about water, but all the meaning therein, you know, of the possibilities that are available to us, and of surrender, right? That what you're saying, needing to just let the water move you and move with the water. You have to be able to surrender to that. You have to be able to be willing to let go of control. And we're so thoroughly conditioned to not do those things. So I want to ask you a question about the work that you're doing with people. When you are doing this work where you're bringing them into the water, whether it's salt water or fresh water, does that matter? I just wanted to ask you that again. It doesn't? Okay.
No.
No, please go ahead. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
it doesn't. No, it calls people where they're going to go.
Okay.
People know. We know. Our physical bodies know. Our consciousness knows where it needs to be and what's safe for it to start with, to be able to open up. You know, it's a womb. But yeah, go ahead, do your next question.
That makes sense. That makes sense, because the ocean is so incredibly powerful, and that can be a bit much for people who might just want to start in a nice little friendly river. So that makes a lot of sense. So when you're working with people and you're doing this, whether you're in the water with them or not, because we are so thoroughly conditioned, and because it is, you know, a big commitment and a lot of work, and often quite uncomfortable for the ego to dive into that stuff and let go of it, how does that process come across to you? I mean, are people who are arriving in your life as clients, are they people who are already on the spiritual path and they usually have already a foundation of some understanding, or are you getting the gamut, you know, people who are brand new to it and people who are more experienced? What's that like?
I prefer working with people who already have a range of tools, because I'm not the holding your hand and nurturing you through the process. I know that people can do this work. And I know but you don't want to throw people into a place and they have a, you know, psychotic break. Like, I get that there's, you know, I have plenty of training in all of that as well. But the water has a way of knowing when and how much energy, as does your own physical being. You will never experience more energy than you can actually, not that your brain thinks you can do, but that your physical body can, and the auric body can actually process through. It's this system that if our brains had to be in charge of it, we would not still be here having this conversation, because the intelligence of the water is speaking to the intelligence of your consciousness and your energetic field. So that conversation that you're maybe hearing, maybe not, maybe sensing, maybe not, maybe there's something that you're connecting with, or, you know, but it's having that conversation already. And in fact, as we know, even when we're physically working, the work has already been done. Like, we're just manifesting the outward reality so someone can see it. The work has been done. Like, we've already had this, the three of us have already had this interaction. And now we're just playing it out so we can see what it feels like in the physical body, but we've already done this. So I know nothing bad's going to happen. So hence, I prefer working with people who are just like, I'm ready for this work. Usually the other people sort of don't get it, or, people know when they need to be around me.
Well, I think some of our audience might need to be around you, which is why we're all here connecting. I think there was some divine timing there for this conversation. So maybe you can share a little bit about how people get in touch with you, how they can connect and start that process of working with you.
Yes. People can connect with me on Instagram. I'm great with DMs, the Water Matrix on Instagram. I'm good with email. I'm not the person out there, here's this next program. I would just email me. If someone like knows that they're supposed to be, I'm a direct communicator. I'm drawn to this. Let's talk more about it. Great. I love those kinds of conversations, and then it unfolds. So there's an email on my website, thewatermatrix.org, or Instagram seems to be the very popular thing for everyone nowadays as well.
Yes, it is very, very visual. And your website is beautiful, by the way. It's so beautifully designed. It feels watery. It feels flowy.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I was feeling that when I was looking at it. So it's a gorgeous website, and we will be putting all of your details that you just mentioned and more into the show notes that people can find you there. Jenna, did you have anything else you wanted to ask her? I've got one more question for you, Elle, before we say goodbye.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, super quick. Is there anything you'd like to leave with the audience? Because we've been talking about water in a very expansive, deeply spiritual way. And we always want to make sure that we're helping our audience get the information, we're getting them as much as possible. So if there were a little gem that you were going to leave with everyone before we say goodbye about water, about healing, about our presence on the earth, whatever you feel is going to come from your heart right now, what would you say?
First thing I would say, and because I know everyone doesn't have access to all of these things, and if you have access to clean water in some way, put your hands in it, put your feet in it, if there's access to clean water. And I know that not everyone has that. So just that little action every single day allows that communication to begin. That you don't have to jump into doing sessions, all that. You just have to start making that connection. And that just takes even touching your fingertips to it. It really is just that simple, because the water wants to speak and have relationship with the other beings on this planet. That's why it's here. It wants relationship, and it wants to hear us all, and to hear it. It wants that dialogue. So even if that's all you can do, put your fingertips in some water.
Oh, that's beautiful. I absolutely love that. That's gorgeous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Making me want to take a bath tonight. Like, I want to bathe. I want to be in the water now. Like, this is just, I want to go to the stream nearby. I'm thinking about all the ways I need to connect, like today and tomorrow. So thank you for bringing that back to me in a more prominent way, Yael.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for being with us today, Yael, and we hope to stay in touch. Please stay in touch with us, and
I love that.
We keep passing on what you're doing to our audience and keep them connected with you in this very, very, very important topic. And I want to say something like bounty of knowledge and wisdom, the water and our relationship with Earth really needs to improve. So thank you for being here with us today, and just modeling that and reminding us all of these very important, essential things about being here on this particular planet. So everyone, we really, really hope that you enjoyed this talk. Please, as always, like and subscribe. Again, you know how we feel about that. And come back and let us know what you thought of the discussion today. What resonated with you? What stood out to you? Do you relate, and why? We always love to hear from you. You know that. So please, please reach out, tell your family, tell your friends, and we will see you again very soon on the other side.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Go put your feet in some water.